Fast, frenetic, bonkers, outrageous. Those are just a handful of words that you would use to describe Rallycross. So why then is it struggling so much? If you were to say this 5 years ago, people would raise an eyebrow at you. However, when you look at the state of World Rallycross at the moment, with just 8 full-time entries, and a calendar that only began in mid-August, which in turn was apparently so that the teams could prepare their cars for the electrification that was being implemented for this year as well, then that raising of the eyebrow isn't quite as much of a shock at the moment. So how do we get here? And I guess more importantly, how do we get the sport to return to a state of the mid-2010s? To which I'll offer some of my thoughts on the matter towards the end of the video. For me though, to understand how we got here, we need to begin right from the dawn of the sport. Trust me, there is some context to this. Since Rallycross began in 1967 at the Linden Hill circuit, it's always been a unique form of racing that began in humble upbringings, even if the sport actually began thanks to an ITV sports television programme. But still, I've always associated Rallycross as a sport that began with drivers taking modified hatchbacks and sports cars on small, half-tarmac, half-dirt tracks with very short races that last no longer than 6 or 7 minutes. It meant that drivers were in a hurry to get moves done despite the multiple heat format, and you'd be able to get away with contact scot-free. Within reason, obviously. This proved to be a very popular concept, as it garnered audiences in the late 60s of 10 million viewers on UK TV. Admittedly, back then only 3 TV channels existed, but this wasn't a fluke because it garnered 10 million plus TV viewers regularly. In the mid-70s, we had the sport expand across the continent, culminating in the FIA setting up rules for the European Rallycross Championship in 1976. As time went on, more and more categories were introduced or updated, which leads to the present day, where we have the Super 1600s, RX2s, and Supercars/RX1s. The state of the sport up until 2014, and that year is crucial in my view, was very stable. Obviously, gone are the days when 10 million people would watch in their living rooms, but the sport has got a consistent and loyal following which has kept the sport in a healthy position, which is also down to how the sport has barely changed the formula. Short races, multiple heats, very familiar locations, intense action, with said action going on pretty much the whole day. Then 2014 comes along and the sport gets even better, but in my view, at a cost. Rallycross becomes a truly global sport with the introduction of the FIA World Rallycross Championship. The series had a huge number of cars entered into each round. Sure, quite a lot of them were one-offs, but that isn't necessarily a bad thing, and at the same time we still had enough full-time entries to create a compelling championship battle. In fact, 85 drivers competed in World Rallycross that year, 2 of which somehow ended up with championship points in minus numbers. However, the track roster for that season consisted mostly of tracks which were either designed as Rallycross tracks, or racetracks which had Rallycross tracks built into them for a long time, the exceptions being Franciacorta, Istanbul Park and St. Louis. As the years go by though, more and more racetracks are being added to the schedule, and also to the replacement of purpose-built Rallycross facilities. In my view, this was not a good idea. Taking Rallycross away from the tracks that brought the sport up in the first place, as well as helping it get the global appeal that it has now, almost feels like somewhat of a betrayal. Then to replace them with racetracks with newly constructed Rallycross tracks built into them, and not only that, tracks that almost feel like a downgrade in terms of the quality of racing that they produce, just seems like the wrong direction to go in. Yes, you could argue that the series, with its increase in global appeal and audience, needed to try and modernise itself. Well, if you want to talk about a sport modernising, this is the sport in 1979 at Linden Hill, and this is the sport in 2017 at the same circuit. is pretty much identical, just with more modern machinery and better safety standards. Plus, of course, better picture quality. Oh, and without Murray as well.
To the lead goes Michael Nordstrom in the RS200, and John Smith spins, and Pekka Rantanen in the RS200 hits John Smith. That's one place gained anyway.
The sport, from a concept perspective, has been pretty much unchanged. And that concept worked just as well in 2014 as it did in 1967. So to try and freshen up the sport in some capacity, particularly with how the World Rallycross Championship has changed its track roster, just isn't necessary. These old Rallycross tracks are the lifeblood of the category and is where you'll find the next stars of Rallycross honing their craft, so it's important they serve a purpose. There may also be some of you saying, well, Global Rallycross and Nitro Rallycross have hardly used conventional Rallycross tracks in its history, and they've proved very popular at various stages. I would agree with you on that point, but the reason why these tracks were created in the first place was because Rallycross in America was a rather new thing, even in the early 2010s, so they had to create them from the ground up. Or in Nitro Rallycross's case, create them from the ground up and add several tons of chili sauce to the insanity level. Also, I still find it funny that the Global Rallycross Championship hosted just 5 rounds outside the US in its entire existence. One other area to point towards, certainly World Rallycross's struggles, is the switch to electrification and the effect a delay in implementing these rules had. When the switch to electric cars was delayed by 1 year, manufacturers seemed put off, so factory-backed efforts from Audi, Volkswagen and Peugeot were withdrawn, and the teams running them either took sabbaticals or switched to privateer-only teams. Now that the series is all electric, it is paying a price for the delay. What I will say is that once all the manufacturers left the series in 2018, we still had a pretty healthy grid for 2019, just with privateer entries, and the championship was one of the most exciting and closest sport championships Rallycross has ever had. That therefore proves that you don't need car manufacturers to be actively involved to create an exciting series, although healthy car entries do help. Also, it seems clear that the new way to watch the World Rallycross Championship and its support categories has gone down like a concrete bubble. Instead of being readily available, live and free on YouTube for almost all of its races, it is now behind a paywall. Especially considering the current situation for the series, it's easy to see why fans are mystified. So, let's now get to the subject matter at hand. How do we get the sport back to what we know it can be? For a start off, it needs to be more accessible to fans. It also feels like there's a need to revolutionise the wheel with Rallycross by the organisers of the sport. The sport was becoming ever more popular as time went on, especially into the 2010s, because of its short, sharp, in-your-face, no-nonsense, contact-enthused racing, with additions like the Joker Lap also being a cool element that helped the sport become more trendy. In fact, in an age where people's attention span is apparently getting shorter and shorter, Rallycross is, in theory, the perfect motorsport for a modern world. Then there's the tracks. Stay to your roots. There is a reason they helped create the dawn of the sport and get it to the booming popularity that it enjoyed in the late 2010s. I think it's amazing that the Nitro Rallycross series returned to Linden Hill. Yes, they nitroed it somewhat. However, the fact that they helped get that track back where it belongs on the global stage is fantastic. Is it surprising that with the World Championship, lots of these newly Rallycross converted racetracks have dropped off the schedule over the years? Istanbul Park, Franciacorta, Hockenheim, Kota, Yas Marina and Silverstone. Tracks like Linden Hill, Loiec and Estering matter. Rallycross can easily get back to the highs of its recent past. Like I said earlier, it's a racing discipline that's incredibly unique. One of the reasons F1 has gained popularity is how the cars are so incredibly cool. They strike you and grab your attention. Rallycross grabs your eyeballs in a completely different way. cars are pretty much jumped up versions of small hatchbacks, the sort of cars you see on the road every day. Yet here they are, reaching 0 to 60 in under 2 seconds, quicker than what an F1 car can achieve, all whilst beating and banging each other across multiple surfaces, going sideways, and every now and then jumping several feet in the air, all in the space of about 6 or 7 minutes. It's a cool motorsport. They just need to keep the formula the same. That's going to be it for this video though. I hope you enjoyed it, and also say what you think about Rallycross and whether you agree with what I said in the comments. However, until the next video, enjoy the rest of your day.